Hello everyone and welcome to Magic Gathering Strat. I'm BinkyB and this will be a series of live Tiny Leaders matches. I will be the focus pilot this tournament. I'm playing Shuyan, the Silent Tempest. And well, I didn't really have time to build a deck the way I wanted it, so it's some kind of tempo control hybrid sort of thing. It was going to be something completely different, but hopefully I will be able to do that in the future. I'm playing against Sebastian, who is playing Varolz, the Scar Striped, and I can't really say that this is a favorable matchup because he's good at going to the late game, and I think he beats me in the late game. So anyway, I get to probe turn 1, which is kinda nice. So I can plan out my future turns a bit better. So when you're going up against Rock, all I care about is the card engine cards, really. So if my opponent has like, in this case a Phyrexian Arena, that's the sort of card I want to stop. So 4 lands, Phyrexian Arena, Thoughtseize, and the stupid Hydra. And of course Sebastian knocks over my poor camera a bit, but it's okay. The downside of being able to know what your opponent has in hand is, of course, if he draws very well after that. I'm trying to take his Phyrexian Arena, but of course that is not an option. I also elected to pay the mana for probe. If I would have drawn like a Ponder or Preordain or something, I would be a bit sad, but well, you can't really expect that. So an Overgrown Tomb into a Thoughtseize most likely, and that's what I expected as well. I mean, it's the Rock, it should be some kind of disruption. But my hand is pretty solid against this, I think. I know he doesn't have a removal spell, so he kinda has to take Jace if he hasn't drawn one or are hoping to draw one. But of course the target in mind is True Name Nemesis. But either way, it leaves the Vendilion Clique in my hand, which will be able to take the Phyrexian Arena. So quite happy with that. And my mana is looking pretty good as well, so overall I feel pretty well equipped to get through the early stage of this match without losing too much. So the version of the deck I wanted to build was more of a toolbox control deck with Cunning Wish, Burning Wish and stuff like that. And the main plan for game 1 would be Energy Field Rest in Peace. It would just lock out so many decks, and then be able to like stitch together some sort of win. It wouldn't be that hard, but unfortunately I didn't have the cards, so I just play Jace, and my opponent has had 2 draws to find a removal spell for Jace. And I kinda assume he has one because he took the True Name, but I guess you could argue that Jace is more beatable than True Name. But Jace gets smothered, so well, that's life, I suppose. Now my hopes are on Vendilion Clique. First of all, it's going to take the Phyrexian Arena out of my opponent's hand. That's the main goal. And then I'm very interested in just starting to clock my opponent, and Vendilion Clique does a good job against, or a good job of that, so that's my plan. Hopefully my opponent hasn't found too much in the way of removal, but you never know. He will get an extra draw step from the click as well, so it's not impossible. The sequencing of my lands made it so I could not play my basic mountain, which I tried to do, but quickly realized that it was not an option because I needed double blue. and in response to the trigger, my opponent has found an abrupt decay, killing the click, which is not really what I was hoping for. But so the hand is still lands and arena and the Hydra, so I take the arena, and I know my opponent can't do too much else this turn. Probably gonna play Treetop Village and pass it back. But I'm running out of steam pretty fast here, so I don't feel too confident. I just have a bunch of lands in hand really, and that's about it. So hopefully I can draw some form of action. That would be the best, like a Monastery Mentor or something, but instead I'm drawing another land and playing my commander. I don't really expect to go too far with Shujan, but I mean, if I draw, for example, a lightning bolt, I can get a pretty big hit in and maybe start clocking him. Also, if my opponent tries to go for the Treetop Village, I mean, animating Treetop Village into Shuyan and open mana seems like suicide, so I don't really expect my opponent to do that. And I don't think he will be playing Hydra for 2, that seems like too little value, so I know he has lands and Hydra and one mystery card, I think. So it's not too much of a threat attacking here. My hand is still lands and a freshly drawn Geist of Saint Draft. Good threat, but yeah. So I just attack. I mean, if he animates, he's taking a huge risk, so I don't think he will be doing that. But you never know, of course. Unless my opponent has some kind of removal spell. But in that case, we just get to trade and I'm fine with that. So I can't think of that many cards that would make this go poorly for me. So now I just expect some kind, I mean, an animation of Treetop and a block. Yeah, and I'm like, alright, fine, I won't do anything. But my opponent actually have a response, and I'm like, okay, now if I have like a counter spell, you're pretty screwed. But he had Golgari Charm to regenerate his Treetop Village, so there was actually one card that made this go pretty poor for me. But I guess Geist of Saint Draft is a good follow-up, but now my hand is a land and I have 1,000 lands in play and I'm not doing much right now. And this turn I expect the Hydra to come out on 3, but if my opponent has found something better to do, well, then I'm in pretty bad shape. So as you can see, he still has the Hydra in hand, but I think he has drawn like one more mystery card now, so we will see. He's reaching for a bunch of mana, but stops at 2, so I'm like, alright. And the card he has drawn is a Bitter Blossom, an infinite supply of blockers, and he still has mana open to animate Treetop Village, so that draw was as bad for me as it could be, especially since my hand is lands. And I think I just drew another land, so I'm just gonna play Shurion again and play a land and pass. And right now I don't really have a good way of winning. I mean, my threats are depending on getting some kind of hit in, and then maybe I can finish them off with burn, but with all those blockers that will be pretty hard. And also now I know he has another land, so it's very likely that the Hydra will come out on 4, and on 4 I don't think you can expect a miss. Maybe you don't get the best card in your deck, but you will get a card, which is pretty nice. And a 4/4 means that attacking will be extremely difficult for me. If I had a spell in hand, like any spell, I could at least attack with Chuyan, but I don't, so I have to draw one. So Genesis Hydra comes down on 4 and reveals basically everything you need. It's a bird, it's a sword, some crap guy, and a torpor orb. And I mean, torpor orb I know is for his stupid combos, but I don't see why you wouldn't take the sword here. You have an opponent with like one card in hand that doesn't do anything, and you have an endless supply of flyers. So yeah, the sword gets selected after some thought, and I don't really know what to do here. The only real resource I have left is my life total, so I have to try to like man up and stall the game until I can finish him off with like one big attack and some burn spells. But right now, right now I'm missing both the big attack and the burn spells, so it's not looking too great for me. Still have the mountain in hand. I don't know what I drew here. It looks like a spell, which is pretty good. Ah, yeah, it's the young pyromancer. It's kind of miserable to play a deck that that needs spells and is full of spells, and when you don't have spells it doesn't do anything. So yeah, my last two cards in hand are the basic mountain and the spell snare, and I was debating whether or not to play the mountain because it's not even super likely that he plays a spell that costs 2, and even if he has one he will probably play it post combat. But then after passing the turn I realized no, with Sword of Fist and Famine in play you will be playing spells pre-combat, so I should just have played my mountain and just hope that the sword would be pretty much forcing my opponent to play stuff in his first main phase. So the sword gets equipped, and the last card in hand, freshly drawn, is Sign in Blood, which actually costs 2. So yeah, I could just let that resolve and use it as a burn spell, but I figured playing Spell Snare gives me a token and it grows Shuyan and gives him double strike, so the Hydra can't attack, which is pretty good. But now I'm just like, yeah, even if I can draw well here, it has to be really well. So in comes the fairy, my mountain is gone and my hand is empty. So now the best card I could draw is probably like Sphinx's Revelation or Sword of Fist and Famine, obviously. Sword of Fist and Famine would solve all my problems, but then I have to draw it. Varolz comes in and the sword gets re-equipped. So if I could draw Sword of Fist and Famine, for example, I could equip Geist of Saint Traft and start bashing for a lot of damage. Even if he chump blocks the Angel token, he still takes 4, and next turn I can probably like give Geist double strike or something, and then the game will be over very quickly. But it all starts with a good top deck. And I believe my mighty top deck was a mental misstep. So yeah, way to go. I guess mental misstep has had like 1 target so far, and that would be the Thoughtseize. So it's not the end of the world, but anyway. Also, I think Treetop Village could have come in last turn. Or yeah, because you just don't play your Sign in Blood and attack, and I think you will be in pretty good shape. So the sword gets re-equipped to a fairy, and I can't block flyers. I just have dorky ground guys. I also think that you should be attacking with the Hydra, for example. I just don't see how that could end poorly for you. So I have to discard my mental misstep. But I mean, how many more good cards can my opponent draw? And apparently a pretty good amount, since he drew a Phyrexian Arena. So now I just have one plan. There is only one way I will win this game. And that is to somehow stitch together a string of burn spells, since my opponent is burning himself for 2 every turn. It's either that or Sword of Feast and Famine, but time is running out, so I need to find it like now. And I found a volcanic island, so it didn't really help me there. As it stands, I expect to have one more turn, maybe, before things get really out of control, because my opponent can attack me for a good amount of damage this turn. He can send in his fairies, Varolz, and Treetop Village. And I mean, I can trade Shuyan for Treetop Village, or maybe like Shuyan and the token for Genesis Hydra, and like my other 2 creatures for Treetop Village or something, and still take a bunch of damage and just lose my whole board. So I don't expect to live much longer than 1 turn, and since I have no cards in hand, I don't think I can do 15 damage, or I guess 13 damage is what I have to reach. But lucky for me, only the fairies comes in, so that doesn't really do anything. I mean, I take a bit of damage, but now I will get 2 more turns, so I still need to draw something good here. Like, I don't know, I mean, a Ponder or a Brainstorm or something would be a good start. So I can, or I guess Ponder or Preordain would be the best. Brainstorm is not that great right now. But it has to be something good. And lucky for me it is. It's a Sphinx's Revelation for 4. It fogs the previous attack and gives me some hope of winning. I mean, if I can find a burn spell or 2, I might be able to stitch together a win here. So one of them was an island, and then a Ponder, and that's exactly what I need. But this was one of the hardest Ponders I have ever laid eyes on. I mean, there was a Sword of Fire and Ice, which is good, but I don't have a way to get through. Then there was like an Electrolyze, and I believe a Chain Lightning or something like that, or a Preordain maybe. So there is some good cards, but I'm not sure if they're good enough. The problem is that I don't think I have much turns left. So I'm also considering whether or not I should attack this turn. I mean, Shuyan can come in and trade for basically trade for a fairy token, which is not super great. I can also throw away Geist of Sintraft, but overall it doesn't feel that great to attack. But ultimately I decide that the cards from Ponder is good enough. But now I have to take into consideration the Sword of Feast and Famine, because I want... Basically I need all the cards that are here. The 2 in my hand and the 3 on top. Then I realized that the only card that I didn't want was Disrupting Shoal. So if I keep that on top, I draw it. And then I can discard it to Sword of Feast and Famine, leaving me with Chain Lightning, Preordain, and Electrolyze, which is hopefully gonna be good enough. So I'm looking at a pretty good amount of burn, but I'm not really sure if I have the time. That's the ultimate problem here. I can maybe get to like 7 or 8 points of damage, but that, as it stands right now, since my opponent fetched here, leaves me with with the expectation that my opponent has to give me 2 more turns. And I just don't think that is an option, but maybe it is. Now my opponent's attack is a bit worse, since I can pretty effectively chump block my way through his attack. And now Shuyan is not that important, so I could like trade Shuyan and a token for a treetop and then chump block the 2 big guys and not take that much damage, and then have a decent attack back. So all I need really is to get 2 damage in, and I will be able to win, because I have no, let's see, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, I have 8 points, 8 points of burn ready to go. So if I can get 2 damage in, I'll win next turn. But that requires me to get that 2 damage in. The bad thing for me though is that all of a sudden, I guess my opponent has been playing pretty defensively for a deck that is crushing me. So I was kind of hoping for a big attack here, but now my opponent plays an Eternal Witness and will be able to untap. So I'm like, no, Golgari Charm, I will never win. But it takes Abrupt Decay, and that doesn't bother me too much, but it basically shuts down all hope of getting 2 points of damage in, unless my opponent attacks with everything here. But now he decides that 2 fairies is enough, the equipped one and another one, so now he has a bunch of blockers. So if I would try to attack, my opponent has 5 blockers, no, 6 blockers even. So I will only get 1 token through, but then my opponent can animate Treetop, so it's 0, and he has Abrupt Decay, so it's like, no, it's not gonna happen. There is no way I can get through. So that means I have to somehow make this game go 1 more turn. But since I know what's on top of my deck, I'm not sure how I will be doing that. Or rather, I only know my top card, and that's a sort of Fire and Ice. So this Preordain has to give me a burn spell, that's basically it, since I have Electrolyze Chain Lightning in hand. And it actually does, it reveals a Lightning Bolt. So I think I end up keeping both. Because, no, I already have the sort of Fire and Ice, yeah. So I'm gonna draw the Electrolyze and then use Electrolyze to draw Lightning Bolt. So that's my plan basically. Try to get 2 points of damage in somehow. The problem is that my plan only works if I survive 1 more turn, and I don't think that is possible. But since my opponent has been playing pretty defensively so far, I at least have some kind of hope. I also feel like I have to use my Chain Lightning right now to add that extra blocker, and in case of some kind of discard spell, I don't want any burn spells left in my hand, because I will need every single one of them. So yeah, I have 6 attackers plus the Angel token, and my opponent has 6 blockers plus Treetop Village, so I cannot get through. If I attack, I will lose Shuyan, Young Pyromancer, Cast the Sintraft, and then trade a bunch of tokens. So that is not a good way, because then I'm dead on the backswing instead. So I have to just leave my forces back and pray that somehow my opponent does not kill me next turn. So end of turn, Shu Yang bites the dust. I don't mind that too much. Now my opponent has 5, I think, fairies that can attack, which means that he will be able to attack for 7, leaving me at 4. So unless he can find some kind of burn or something, I will be fine. And if worst comes to worst, if my opponent attacks with everything and has some kind of pump spell, I can use one of my burn spells to kill off that creature, making me hopefully able to get the last points in with my creatures. So the only thing that wrecks me here is some kind of discard spell, like spoilers, Hymn to Torok, for example. And Hymn forces my hand. I have to use my burn spells now, because otherwise I will lose them, and the only chance I have of winning the game. So I'm just counting up the fairies, and yeah, there is really nothing I can do. I have to go for face here, hoping that that was the best he could do. So I'm burning his face down to 5 and get a token, and I can also draw my lightning bolt and use that. So my opponent is dead next turn to only his own cards. So I just hope that with his last 3 or 4 mana he cannot kill me. Which seems like a hard thing to do, but when your opponent is drawing cards with Senses Divining Top, then you're dead. That's just it. So now I'm left with the fool's hope of that my opponent might screw this up somehow. So 1 mana, Juggernaut or Dreadnought or whatever. It dies immediately, and then you can scavenge with Varolz onto a token, which is more than lethal. Without the Hymn to Torok, I could have electrolyzed the token and my opponent, for example, leaving me alive, but my opponent at 1 life total higher, but that's it. So thank you for game 1.
Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe, it really helps us out. You can find us on Twitter at MagicGathStrat, Facebook /MagicGatheringStrat, or on the web, magicgatheringstrat.com. There you can find articles and free prize-supported leagues. This is all brought to you by our Patreons and cardhoarder.com. If you enjoy this content, please consider supporting us at patreon.com/magicgatheringstrat.